Mike Wolfe, the late Frank Fritz, and the rest of the American Pickers gang have found some incredible treasures over the years, leading to that age-old debate. Which is better, Yoda or Aerosmith? Even if you haven't seen Star Wars, characters like Yoda have become so famous they have transcended the original films. Still, that said, the Star Wars find from Season 16 is one that true fans would appreciate most. A phone call to sculptor, artist, and model maker Mario Chiodo confirmed that Mike and Frank were looking at the real deal, prototypes he had made of Yoda for the Jedi Master's introduction into the on-screen Star Wars universe. While there were a few models, there was only one that Chiodo could confirm he had actually made, thanks to a telltale glaze put on the model's eyes. It was Frank who negotiated for the sale of that particular model, and for a cool $6,250, the Pickers walked away with a little slice of movie history.
You always want the one that's made by the artist, and this is the only one that we can confirm.
In a Season 17 episode called Hot Rod Hero, Mike and Frank took a tour of a massive property filled with unthinkably imaginative cars, including one so rare and so intricate that it stunned them speechless with the love and craftsmanship that had gone into building it, piece by piece. That was the Wooden T, a Model T car built entirely from painstakingly handcrafted pieces of wood forming the body of a car built over a roadworthy frame and engine. From a hand-whittled hood ornament carved from black walnut to wooden windshield wipers and hubcaps, the project took 7 years to complete. Mike and Frank didn't even make an offer on the car, but they did promise to try to help the owner get his father's creation into a museum where it could be appreciated by the public.
We've got a lot of contacts. We'll make some phone calls. I've always said that part of my responsibility as a picker is to put things where they belong.
In Season 19, Mike and Frank met a guy named Phil who had something that really stood out: an International Harvester Metro van with an oddly shaped Aerosmith logo painted on the side. The van's owner had rescued it out of the mud, but didn't know much more about it. He'd heard rumors that it might have been the first van Aerosmith used when they started playing together. While it sounded too good to be true, it was weird enough that the Pickers decided to do some investigating of their own. They were able to get original Aerosmith guitarist Ray Tabano to take a look, and ultimately confirmed that yes, it was their old van. Tabano said, "It's been like 40 years since we've been in this thing. I just flashed back to when we first started the band. It was this amazing thing. All of a sudden, here's the thing that we lived in. It was like our dressing room. It was like a rolling hotel." Tabano had something else cool, too: pictures of Aerosmith inside the van. Mike and Frank ended up buying it and getting it back to the band.
You guys did such a great job making it look like it did then.
Tether cars were popular in the decades around World War II and were essentially miniature toy race cars outfitted with internal combustion engines that propelled them around a circle track. They were attached and guided by a tether cable, racing at insane speeds of up to 214 miles per hour. When Mike found a vintage Tether car in Season 17, it was missing the engine, which was arguably the most important part. Still, the solid frame and original paint were equal parts valuable and cool, and after adding in a memory jar and some Tether car frames, Mike took the whole lot home for $1,100. Back in the day, traveling sideshows had their exhibits advertised with massive banners, and in Season 17, the American Pickers found a set of banners hand-painted by one of the most famous sideshow artists of the 20th century, Fred Johnson. Johnson worked for the O. Henry Tent and Awning Company for around 4 decades, starting in the 1930s. The banner that Mike and Frank stumbled across, depicting all the classic movie monsters of the era and an advertisement from the Monster Mansion, wasn't signed, but they still offered a not-too-shabby $3,500 for the piece. At the same pick, they found some other cool banners too, including one advertising an animatronic show depicting The Last Supper. It's not often that viewers get to see Mike completely baffled, but he freely admitted that he had never seen one like it, and he ended up buying it for $2,000.
Totally throws me off base. I've never seen a religious
Last Supper
circus banner.
The cycle car dates back to a time when cars were relatively new. With most people unable to afford a car, manufacturers got creative and came up with a hybrid cross between cars and motorcycles. There was still room for a passenger, but it ran on a motorcycle engine. At the time it sold, it was for a relatively reasonable $450, or adjusted for inflation, about $15,000. The one that Frank and Dave Ort found dated to 1914, and even though it was restored, it was complete and rare enough that they agreed it needed to be in a museum. It ended up being purchased and then resold by the Pickers, and according to the National Motorcycle Museum, the car remains one of only 2 still around. In a Season 23 episode, Mike was climbing through a treasure trove of signs when he uncovered an ultra-rare pinball machine that he didn't recognize, and for good reason. The machine was one of just 85 made back around 1975, making the Bally slapstick machine one of the rarest pinball machines that any collector could try to get their hands on. Exactly why the company designed and produced just 85 machines wasn't clear, but as Mike said, that's part of the allure. Imagining the life story of these rare machines is half the fun of owning them, and perhaps more than half, as their experts suggested it just wasn't a very fun game to play and the demand had fallen flat.
The thing about it is it's a super rare machine. It wasn't a super fun machine.
Still, the gamer's loss was the collector's win, and it was valued, in present rough condition not working, as being worth around $3,000. An original offer of $1,500 was countered with $1,750, allowing them to make a deal that both parties were happy with. LA-based artist Baron Margot collected and used scrap in his underground art pieces, and although he started by building small-scale model cars, he soon struck on the idea of building full-size cars. They ended up being equal parts imaginative, ingenious, and, best of all, were street legal, including the one with a jet engine mounted on the back. That's the one that Frank and Mike took out cruising in season 12. And there's a lot to be said for the expressions of pure joy on their faces as they sailed down the street, pulled up beside other cars, and asked for directions to In-N-Out Burger. Margot said,
Mike and Frank were right around the lake, just laughing all the way. If I can bring an emotion out of somebody, then I've succeeded in, being an artist.
The $50,000 price tag was a bit much, and as Fritz pointed out, the insurance would be astronomical. So they didn't end up taking it home, but it was a bucket list kind of day. In season 23, Mike headed out to pick the collection of Gene Warren, a stop-motion expert who worked on films like Terminator 2 and Peter Benchley's The Beast. It wasn't only the movies that were iconic, though, and among the stop-motion props, Wolfe found a collection of models from one of the most well-known advertising campaigns in recent history, Pillsbury's Doughboy. Warren's sons explained that there were heads made with different facial expressions, so swapping them out could give the illusion of speech without needing to animate the mouths.
When he needed to make, like me, you started with an M, you took the head off, then you put the E part on it.
Also included were the hands, and a brilliant story about how Warren's sons also starred in the commercials, as the hands that poked the Doughboy's belly and made him giggle. The Doughboy heads were the embodiment of everything the pickers looked for in a great piece. Americana, pop culture, nostalgia, advertising, art, and a story all wrapped up in one pick. The Warren brothers' original $2,500 offer was countered, and for $2,250, Mike took them all home. Tom Hanks wasn't always the serious, award-winning, unconditionally beloved actor he is today. He started out as a goofball comedian. One of his most famous movies from that era of his career was Big, where a kid version of himself makes a wish on a fortune-telling machine and wakes up with an adult body. Well, the American pickers didn't find Zoltar, but in season 17, they did find another fortune-telling machine called Gypsy Grandma. Even though Mike said he'd seen people asking upwards of $10,000 for one, he stressed that he wouldn't be interested in paying that much. However, he was willing to take on the restoration work for this one. For $1,400, he took Grandma home, along with contact information and restoration experts who could help get the coin-op treasure up and running again. Authenticating rare photos from the Wild West is admittedly hard, but in season 13, Frank and Mike came across something that had unlimited potential: an original photo of Billy the Kid. Purchased by their then owner in 1979, the tintype was sourced from the daughter of Pat Garrett, the man who had shot and killed Billy the Kid in 1881. The owner said that forensics experts had been consulted and were certain that it was him.
Any jury in the country would convict with that kind of facial recognition.
And as far as value, the previously sold image of Billy the Kid blew all auction estimates away and sold for a whopping $2.3 million. Needless to say, they were quick to say that this was way out of their price range, but agreed that researching items and the potential to come across something of massive historical importance like the photo was the fun part of collecting. It's said that something is as American as apple pie, but the same could be said about Jell-O, which is what makes the vintage Jell-O wagon Frank and Mike found in season 17 so cool. Dating to the early 1900s, the wagon still sported the original paint, logos, and the name of the Genesee Pure Food Company in Leroy, New York, and would have been used to sell Jell-O. Although it was valued at between $8,000 and $10,000, Mike offered $6,500 and walked away with the find. One of the only things that made Mike hesitate was the fact that it was going to take a very specific sort of collector to not only want to buy the wagon, but be able to store it. Fortunately, they found that buyer. The wagon ultimately ended up in Buffalo, New York's Pierce Arrow Museum, just a stone's throw from where it had originally been made in Rochester.
Even though it's not perfect, the condition of the wagon is amazing.
One of Mike's biggest dreams was rebuilding a 1911 Harley Davidson motorcycle from pieces they recovered from across the country. In season 11, after more than 4 years of looking, he finally found the last piece, the motor. And it wasn't an easy buy, but Mike was still ecstatic, saying,
This thing is sweaty, it's scarred, it's rusty. I've been dreaming about it. Finally, we got the heartbeat for it.
And it was about more than just getting him a bike. The pickers also praised the entire community who had worked to not only bring all the pieces together, but also get it up and running again. Preserving such an intricate part of history was a group effort, and at the end of the day, that's what the show is all about.